Thanks, Matt, for getting dressed for us. Appreciate that. We got the crazy shoes memo. We got to spice up the panel today, Matt. It's off to a great start. We got some cool companies up here. We got ThredUp, Chubbies, Pepper Jam. This isn't your normal list of brick and mortar type companies, and you guys have I think a strategic advantage of running your companies without any legacy issues. From the ground up, et cetera. So I think in this panel, what we want to, as we talked, what we want to unearth is starting from the ground up and everything, and how you're constructing your marketing and media plans from a performance and brand perspective. How you're doing that differently. How maybe instead of the typical silos of you guys do ROI over here, you guys over there are measuring brand performance. What are some of the ways that we're doing that? So let's go down the line really quickly, starting with you, Karen. Tell us a little bit about yourself, about the role in the company.
Sure. I'm Karen Clark. I am VP of Marketing Communications and Partnerships at ThredUp. So if you don't know what ThredUp is the world's largest fashion resale marketplace. We make it really easy for you to buy and sell secondhand apparel online. And I'm responsible for marketing campaigns that really raise the awareness of secondhand, get people excited to try secondhand, think secondhand first, and also retail partnerships that are intended to really usher in a more circular, sustainable fashion future.
Awesome.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Montgomery. I'm the co-founder and chief digital officer at Chubbies. If you haven't heard of Chubbies, we build weekend wear. We build products and content that are oriented around that Friday at 5 p.m. feeling. And we heard about the casualization of the workplace, so if we can keep going down that direction, maybe we'll get shorts and weekend wear involved.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Matt.
Thanks, Sean. I'm Matt Gilbert. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Pepper Jam. Pepper Jam, some of you may know it better as eBay Enterprise, but today Pepper Jam is an affiliate marketing technology platform and service organization, and our whole purpose in life is to give marketers, like my two panelists, a viable alternative to create operating leverage outside of those primary sales and marketing channels where you guys all know you don't have a whole lot of control, and we're in business of trying to give you some and give you a subsidy that enables you to fund your growth.
All right, great. Well, Karen, let's start with you. When you're allocating dollars and budgets to supporting the brand of ThredUp as well as performance marketing, give us a little bit of insight as to what that calculation is.
We definitely think of healthy mix of short-term growth goals, long-term growth goals, but I think that we're increasingly trying to think about how we take a budget and maximize it across both brand and performance channels. So a most recent example that comes to mind is we just did a really cool campaign with Olivia Wilde where we worked with her to redesign secondhand shirts in a collection called Choose Used, getting people excited to buy used clothing and fight fashion waste. Total brand marketing campaign, right? But along the way, we're thinking about, okay, how do we take this content, optimize it, make it work for performance channels as well, and achieve the right KPIs across everything that we're doing. So that's the way we think about it. It's like, how do you get a really great story and make it work across all channels?
Okay, Tom, for Chubbies, does it matter about if I'm imagining you both run, like I said, very direct response or e-commerce or direct to consumer type companies. When you're deploying these allocations towards response, does the brand aspect matter?
Absolutely. I mean, so for Chubbies, we're building an emotional brand. When you're talking about the Friday at 5 p.m. feeling, it's hard to be just cut and dry. So everything that we do is built with brand in mind. So the same people who are running and creating our direct response ads are the same people who are filming our brand videos. And everything ties back to a metric and some sort of performance set of data. And so for us, the metric that you're talking about is the main thing that varies. But in direct response, we make sure that we're carrying brand, we're carrying engagements, we're getting shares, we're getting people commenting on the content we're putting out, as well as shopping and purchasing and things like that. So It's a vital component of every single ad unit that we put out, every single campaign that we run, is that those two things are working in concert.
Okay, and with Matt, with Pepper Jam related to these two brands, when they're coming to you and they're clearly watching everything coming through the line and down to the transaction, all the ROI, what are you presented ever with brands that are also looking to measure awareness, to measure loyalty and intent beyond commerce?
Yeah, there's a fundamental shift that I've seen over the last few years in particular where the disciplines of brand versus performance used to be very separate, right? Often separate teams, separate measurement, separate budget. What we see today with most effective marketers are actually bringing those two things together. And there's a recognition that every touch you have with a potential consumer, you have an obligation to both share your brand story and drive them to the next stage of the journey. And the journey's not linear anymore. So if you miss that opportunity, you may never see them again. So the concept of actually building brand first and then leveraging that brand to ultimately drive conversion doesn't really apply. And that's where you see old brands struggling, is trying to get out from under that mentality. And newer brands who are disruptors, so that's the way we would characterize them, both of you, recognizing those two things have to be together, and that really it's the metric ultimately that will drive the valuation of the performance, but there has to be both in every touch, and you have to be really smart about how you do that, because otherwise your advertising is just a cost center, and the people who are really growing with the potential to keep that sustainable recognize advertising really ultimately should be a profit center.
So Karen, let's talk a little bit about measurement and data as well. So what are some of the key areas that you're capturing and taking advantage of, and full disclosure and all those good things, so we're not, that there's a relationship and they know it's coming and they're being targeted, et cetera. How is ThredUp approaching data?
Yeah, we're completely depends on the channel and the objective, but for, it's anything from, we're looking at awareness, reach, standard metrics. We put a lot of attention on CPMs, so cost per thousand impression, and the way that we think about trying to move that metric is, can we create a story that is so shareable, so interesting that it actually achieves more efficient reach? So it's shared more, it's picked up by press more, it's talked about and drives an organic halo. So we think about that a lot when we create stories, is like, okay, so if CPM is the metric, how do we drive that down by creating a story that's designed to be shared, essentially. And then, of course, we're, the standard metrics of CPAs, LTV, paybacks, we're looking at all that as well.
How about you, Tom? Doing anything unique in the data space?
Yeah, well, I would echo that kind of the organic side of things is super important. So when we're putting out content, shares, comments, in Instagram it's more comments, and Facebook it was more shares. But those are KPIs for any ad unit that we put out, whether it's performance or kind of quote-unquote brand. So definitely recognizing that the power of distribution lies in your audience is a huge one. The other thing for us is that it all boils back to is your advertising generating incrementality, right? And that's the big thing that we're measuring. And so at a very base level, we are constantly measuring kind of how does your revenue change as your marketing spend changes. And if we are doing a pulse test in TV, for example, that is notoriously difficult to measure, just the very kind of base top line metrics is how does that all boil into incrementality. And for us, we don't put anything under the moniker of brand to get out of having to measure performance. And so in some way, shape, or form, we have to justify that those sorts of expenditures are worthwhile from a revenue perspective, from a customer acquisition perspective. If we have data or if we don't, we need to be able to go out and find it and find a way to test profitably. The other thing that I'd say is making sure that when you're taking a swing where you have small amounts of data, we are constantly trying to figure out what's the smallest level of investment we can take to actually get meaningful data. And so isolating your tests down to very specific geographies, basically finding a way to calibrate some of these massive expenditures that you might take on has been really important for us and something that we just systematically do.
Can you guys both talk a little bit about operationally, organizationally, how you're structured to, even at the human and the tech level, to receive all this information and then optimize and act on it? Like, what does that look like, a day in the life of getting this kind of insight and responses?
We've developed a lot of ad tech internally that allows us to optimize and scale. We have similar structure with teams that develop creative and content that can be used across channels, so the story's coming from a central place. We also tap agencies to help with some of that storytelling. So we do a mix, and it sort of has depended on what stage we are in as a company. I joined in 2009 initially, so I've seen a lot of change. And you know, if we're in innovation mode, that's sort of one set of initiatives, whether you build a team in-house or you sort of outsource and hire an agency. Right now we're in scale mode, so we're tapping agencies more and more. So yeah, that's sort of how I think
interesting.
about it.
Well, everyone's going the other way.
Yeah.
The big guys are insourcing. You're outsourcing as a
As
smaller
we scale,
company.
as it, like
scale.
if the goal is to scale really, really quickly and
Right.
to get to a place that maybe our hiring and our strategy in-house isn't, we're just moving faster.
And are you seeing, you don't have to name any names, but are you seeing those agencies keep up and keep pace with what you have to do on the inside?
It depends. Yeah, we've seen.
They're probably out there, aren't
Yeah.
they? Okay.
Right. And I'm not talking about just like, a performance marketing agency or ad tech or anything. I'm talking branding agencies, I'm talking freelance creatives, I'm
Right.
talking just in general kind of thinking outside of the company to help us scale up to where we want to be.
Awesome. Same with you, Tom? Are you guys insourcing, outsourcing?
We insource most of what we do, and we outsource a small amount. But it's really to find scale. I think ultimately we'd love to have the expertise in-house.
Right.
The thing that we do from a team perspective is that our creatives are also the people who are running media, which is atypical. So every creative gets instant feedback on how their specific spot is performing. And we're launching probably 20 pieces of creative a week. And so the creative team gets tons and tons and tons of feedback. They're launching the ads, they're responsible for the performance. And so I think that's relatively unique. And then one of the things that we've been working on for the last probably 5 years is just this, and they talked about it in, I think, the keynote, is this unified view of the customer. And so we have got very, very close to a unified view. There's probably still more work we can do, but we're understanding kind of the full pipeline from the initial touches from an acquisition perspective over to loyalty, customer experience, things like that. And so from a tech perspective, that's really, really important to be able to correlate your spends to changes in your business. So increases in customer acquisition rates, increases in loyalty, they should all be correlated with how your budget's moving.
Interesting observation from my vantage point as a solution provider to brands like yours. The fastest growing trend that we see is a move towards in-housing, right? But it's combined with the reality that there's scarcity of internal resource to actually be able to accomplish that. So, we've taken the position of two things. One, as data competency builds, we need to make sure that data is available, that we're not the source of truth, that actually you are, and whether that's a third party that you use or your internal resources, it shouldn't be the siloed channel self-reporting on its performance. We should be providing that data back and a perspective. But ultimately, you need to be in a position to understand incrementality, attribution, right, and how you're going to adjust your mix. And I think the other important piece of that is, as a solution provider, we need to provide a solution that actually maps to that need, right? So we're not an agency, but we provide an agency service. And I think that's important because, if you aspired in-house, but you're not ready to do it today, I want to hire educators that are going to teach you how to do that. And over time, I want to be able to back away from that and leave you in control of the management of your program, but ideally running on our technology solution. And so the combination of those two things, really, it's interesting for you guys to say that because it completely validates what I see in our client roster and the momentum and the direction of both of those key themes.
Matt, a little bit more on Pepper Jam. What mix of clients are you seeing across the board from brands and DTC and et cetera that are actually relying on business objectives these days, like down through the line to sale versus just upfront media metrics?
So I think our category is skewed much more to down through the line just historically, right? Because it's a performance-based category. So there's a bias in my answer just inherently in the category that I operate in.
Right.
But I will tell you, as the category, as outcome-based results at scale become more important as a subsidy to those primary channels where you're paying for access, the level of visibility inside a marketing organization and a more traditionally structured marketing organization has moved up from a day-to-day line manager or even an individual contributor into the CMO's office or the CDO's office. And what that means when that happens is that we need to be able to articulate what's going on intelligently, because the strategic value of that channel is now heightened, and therefore it becomes a critical part. So that means good reporting day over day, so that the people who are responsible for getting your email and say what's going on over here have a really good answer, but not just a really good answer, they have an insight, right? So we're seeing people who start there, the direct-to-consumer brands just start there.
Right.
And the more legacy brands are quickly trying to iterate themselves to get there and get out from under sort of the legacy barriers that have prevented them from getting there quickly, whether that's a real estate portfolio or data they can't understand because there's 30 years of it and they don't know where to begin. I mean, there's a variety of barriers to that, but everyone's trying to get there. Some are further ahead than others.
Let's talk about channels for a second. I mean, I imagine you all are nimble and flexible organizations and primarily using digital channels, et cetera. Any traditional channels popping for you guys in terms of the branding and awareness and then down to conversion? Anything, Karen?
Yes. TV is performing really
It's
well.
not dead yet?
Sorry? It's
TV's not dead yet?
It's back.
Okay.
It's back. Yeah, I think in general we're finding that in the theme of brand and performance marketing, we're finding that like long form content, channels that support long form content, whether that's TV, Instagram stories, Facebook stories, lets us tell this holistic message that's really, so imagine with an influencer say, I got this amazing dress from Anthropologie for $20. Plus, I feel really great about my environmental footprint. I was able to extend the life of these clothes. 20% off your next purchase, click here. Right? Like there's this ability to tell a story that touches on both brand and performance in a way that shorter form content can't. So in that perspective, TV's doing really great for us. Influencers, those types of channels, we're doing more and more there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So TV is one that we've been investing in as well. Once again, the key here is what metrics are you tracking? And so we've been doing, over the last 12 months, a lot of really isolated tests to figure out incrementality of the channel, incrementality of creative within channel. But it's really promising. And I think one of the interesting things that I've seen about TV is that they are kind of heavily brand from an outside perspective, but they're getting more and more performance oriented. I think that this is kind of interesting about all these channels, is they're all blending up to this place where you need to be accountable, but you also need to be able to carry a positive brand message. And so TV is kind of coming from the brand side down to performance, and I've seen affiliate kind of going the inverse of very performance oriented up to brand, really pushing kind of the partnerships that enhance brand as opposed to detract from brand, which has been really, really interesting to see. And so yeah, we're pushing into TV. We've done tests kind of across the board. We test just nonstop, but we're finding scale out of TV. And then have seen some glimpses of scale out of podcast and some of the audio related things. A lot harder for us to track, but yeah.
Podcasts are harder to track than TV. That's interesting.
Harder to track because we really try to with all of these, we want the brand impact to come through, and so one of our KPIs is going to be organic search typically. And for podcasting, they're so widely distributed that it's hard to isolate down unless you're spending large budgets.
How about just, I'm fascinated by that. I mean, a little bit more insight on the TV targetability and the attribution down to sales. Are you just seeing a general organic search you mentioned, but a natural pop to things? Or like, what's the assimilation that you're attributing back to TV and its growth or its return?
Through the ad tech we built, it's just sales lift. Like we're able to see, and yeah.
Same, in some way, shape, or form. But we have a layering of KPIs, and we have kind of a layering of payback periods that come through. So if we've delivered 1 million impressions, how long do we expect those to pay back? How long do we wait for this incrementality? Do we look at it in market? Do we look at organic search? Do we look at increased responsiveness to other advertising channels?
Right.
Those are all kind of things that you'd factor into that incremental.
And I mean, in TV, the definition, any of you, through like the addressability channels, through OTT, or is this standard broadcast and cable?
All of the above for us.
Right, okay.
There's some really cool technologies coming out to allow you to track linear a little bit better. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of when did you deliver, how much did you spend, and what did you see in the runoff periods of 1 day, 7 day, 30 day.
Right.
So that's how we measure.
And what channels are not working? What's one that's not necessarily driving your brand and or return?
Everyone's
I
great.
know, I know. We're
Everyone's
waiting for
great.
you.
What's interesting to us is that from a channel perspective, we've thought channels didn't work, and then they did. So TV is something that we've been hacking away at for years, and this year it started to work for us. And so in the past, we may have said this doesn't work, but now it does. I think that's something that's really interesting about the industry in general, is that everyone is constantly developing their platforms. And so Snapchat's an example of something that we ran with maybe 4 years ago, 3 years ago when they opened it up. It was a little less than performant as far as we were tracking it, and they've gotten better and better and better, and now represents an opportunity for us. And so we typically don't try to rule out anything. We kind of rule it out for now, and then get back into it to calibrate.
Very diplomatically put.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really important point, though, Tom, that you're making, is that, the perception of a channel today based on its reality at some past time period is a missed opportunity. You need to come back and you need to have a data-driven testing methodology against it. There's just too much innovation, things happen too quickly, and your brand changes, right? Your consumer profile changes, you're getting smarter, and your ability to unlock the value of something that may not have worked a year or two ago may be there today. And competitors who may have been there driving the price up and failed and backed out may have brought that pricing opportunity back to make that actually a powerful channel for you from an ROI perspective. Right. So you got to get always engaged with opportunity.
Well, guys, our time is up. Please thank our panelists for the time up here today. Thank you.